Evening and welcome to the November 4th meeting of the Select Board. If everyone would please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What's that? What are you talking about? Me. If everyone would please make sure your cell phones are on silent, that would be greatly appreciated. We have a public hearing for the Village Place Road Acceptance pursuant to RSA 674 40A3. Mr. Ayer?
I've been following that for the last couple of years, so I no longer have a financial interest in it. I feel I can vote. I want to poll the board.
Does anybody see any objection?
I don't have one.
No, I don't have one.
All right. Connor, is there anything you would like to add regarding?
So this has been signed off by the town's engineer. You have in your packet a copy of the plans which indicate the two roads to be accepted. It's important to note that the Phase 3, which is the end of the cul-de-sac of Breezy Way, is not to be accepted. That will be ready to be presented for acceptance in October of 2021. The deed has also been reviewed by the town's engineer and the town's council to their satisfaction. And so this is a public hearing for the select board as previously authorized by town meeting to accept the road. And a street accepted under this section shall have the status of a public highway under RSA 229:1. Such street shall be deemed a class 5 highway subject to the municipality's duty of regular maintenance as set forth in RSA 231 unless otherwise designated pursuant to statute.
And then, so the board is asked to consider acceptance of Village Place Drive and Breezy Way excluding Phase 3. I have public comment. There was a public hearing, right, Aaron? I was thinking we'll finish with the board for any comment. So with that, do I have any other comments from the board?
I support it, and then the road and the, everything about it, and the reviews from department heads and attorneys.
No comment, I accept it.
Accept it.
Accepted. All right, public comment? Chief Walker?
I'm not sure if I know the answer to the question, so, shoot me. There's two cisterns on that road, so if you could just check to make, three, but if you just check to make sure that, I know I saw the thing saying drainage infrastructure, but if you just make sure that the cisterns and the property immediately around them are included in that, so that they become property of the town. Thank you.
Just looking to see if it's in the deed here.
They are in the right of way, so even if they're not listed, we can point out or
Yeah, just looking to see. I don't see a noted.
We can add that modification. So motion to accept Village Place Drive and Breezy Way excluding Phase 3 and to modify the deed before the acceptance to read that the two fire cisterns will become property of the town of Barrington.
Okay, I stand corrected. That actually was right on the first page. This says
Item 1.
there's further conveyance as follows. The cistern locations as shown on the plans. Right. So it is already there. Right. I will second that motion. Roll call vote.
air aye.
Bailey, aye.
Hatch aye. Hardikoff aye.
Knapp, aye. Very good. Under appointments, we have budgets for the land use and planning, building and assessing, and then follow-up on fire EMS continuing from October 7th.
Great, so I will be presenting the land use and planning budget for you tonight. For those following along in the budget binder, this is section 16. So in your packet, the select board has an updated cover which indicates the updated health insurance numbers, and you also have a copy of the advisory budget committee minutes for the two budgets tonight, the planning land use and the building and assessing. So for the planning and land use, I want to apologize. One of the pieces of feedback from the advisory budget committee was they made a request to have updated year-to-date, year-end estimates for the budget. Right now, it's estimated that every line will be spent. We don't anticipate that every line will be spent, but time did not allow that proper estimating. And so there will be money left over in the budget, but please bear with us for the budget presentation without that information. So you'll notice outside of the wages and benefits, the biggest change within wages and benefits was the planner position was moved from the admin portion of the budget to the land use portion of the budget. That was in an effort to more accurately reflect the budgetary impact of this department. So you'll see that that dramatically increases the increase to the budget, and the percentage increase was just moved from one portion of the budget to another. Beyond that, the land use consultants line was reduced by $5,000 based on not pursuing an update to a master plan chapter next year. The update to this year's master plan chapter will lead into next year. It's already paid for from this year's budget, and we'll pursue continued updates to the master plan in future years. In the copier lease maintenance line 4443, you'll see an addition of $300, which is a portion of the reduction from land use printing. So essentially those lines are consolidated. The printing line is no longer used, and adding only $300 back into the copier and lease maintenance covers the costs appropriately. So those are the changes. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'm sorry, just for my own, to keep myself straight here. You said the land use salary was moved into this budget but came out of where?
In financial administration. So if you go back to, it's actually listed in two places. If you go to section 21, you'll notice that in section 21, the admin salary line ending in 4110 is a reduction of $57,673, bringing that budget line down to $1.
And what's that bring that total, what was the difference in the bottom for the total percentage?
So this budget,
Reduction of 95.
at a $476,000 budget, it was a reduction of $16,000. But there were other changes made in that budget as well.
Right, that brought the whole thing down. Okay. Like I said, of course, tonight's the night I leave my finance book at home, and it's a pain in the butt to do this all electronically sometimes. Thank you. Questions from the board? Questions from the budget committee? Peter?
Connor, can you repeat what you said about the $750 in line 4443? You said it was combined with what?
You see a $499 reduction in the land use printing line 4550.
Okay.
So that $500 was taken out, and $300 was replaced
Okay.
in that
I
line.
was looking for exactly 300, but it's actually more than that offset, right?
So the net is
Yeah.
minus 200 from the
Thank you.
budget.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
The advisory budget committee recommended reducing 4560 to 1800 and 4571 to 800. So I think that should be noted.
Absolutely, so I have no objection. I was at the ABC meeting where that was discussed. They used the 3-year average, not including 2019, to make that recommendation, and the 3-year average was consistent with the $200 reduction in both lines, and that would be the ABC's recommendation to the board for consideration.
Is there anything that would cause you to object to that?
No.
So.
So moved.
I would act on that advisement.
Yep.
Do we have a plan in place, the other, or moving on to another department? There is questions that remain unanswered from another department that the advisory budget committee had noted. Do we have a plan on reaching out to get that information?
So the requests for additional information were sent. I don't have a timeline on when answers are to be expected. If you're talking about the recreation budget, I know they're meeting with the commission tonight, and that could be a topic of conversation.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
No.
Are we going to reduce those 2 line items, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we just said we were.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Right along.
Building and assessing.
I'm sorry, what's that?
We're moving to
Yes,
building and
building and
assessing.
assessing.
This is section 17.
No, sir. Okay, just for the record, I'm John Huggins, I'm the code enforcement officer. I think probably the budget overview is probably where we want to go, because those are lines that were really, there was some changes and stuff on instead of going through every line individually. The first one was building equipment and vehicle maintenance. Not only am I going over a little bit, last Thursday, the front end started having some knock in it, and I took it down 2 nights and they looked at it. It's actually going in Wednesday. There's some bushings gone in the front end, so, I mean, the vehicle's almost 10 years old. Some things like that do happen. And the only thing I have left on this year that I plan on doing was I got one more service due, and I was gonna get the oil undercoat updated, because you guys had me do the original one last year, and then every year you got an update to it. So I'm gonna be over a few $100s, but I'm asking for an increase from the $1,400 to $1,700, because the last time I got tires, that was the year I spent $1,700, and I can get through this winter, but I'm not gonna be able to get into next winter, so I have to take it out of my next year's budget to get through. Because I'm gonna need tires next year, and that $1,700 will get me through based on nothing else going wrong. So we're kind of crossing our fingers a little bit too, but you know, that $1,700 I believe is gonna be tight. If anything, I'd like to get a little more, but I'm trying to stay conservative in how we go about the budget too.
So you said you can get through this winter and into next year without tires?
Without tires, but I have to spend them before I get in. But by the time I get into the middle of summer and stuff next year, I'm gonna be down to the point where I gotta get them, and I don't wanna go into next winter with bald tires waiting for a budget approval to come through, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, that's actually my question. Is it still safe to drive?
Yeah, I still got, this year I'm gonna be fine for, I'm getting through this winter, I believe. The whereabouts haven't quite shown yet, but they're getting close. It is an automatic all-wheel drive. Even if we replace the vehicle from the different places I go during the course of a season in different weather, I want to make sure I keep something that's not a two-wheel drive vehicle, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I would just prefer that if we needed to, we had good tires on the vehicle rather than waiting till we run it right down.
Yeah, I think I'll be able to get, if I get the budget approved for next year, I'll be all set getting through it. I mean, even if I have to get them in the spring, I know, right now, I know I can get through the winter with the tires. It's just that when I get into next year, there'll be an issue.
Yeah, I would just rather see us have a vehicle that has good sneakers on it as opposed to one that ends up
Yeah, well,
slipping and sliding.
technically, my budget starts in another 2 months anyway, so I know I'm gonna get more than 2 months out of the tires, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep,
Um,
very good, thank
Okay.
you.
The next line is the building equipment and maintenance. It was used, we used to have the copier that we leased, and then when the budget line changed to the building copier and lease maintenance, it was like the lines kind of overlapped, so we weren't using the 4434. and I haven't used it for a couple of years, so basically I just want to do away with that line and keep the next line, which is the 4443, which is what we use to pay for our printing and stuff now. And based off of that, because we split the cost with planning, we both put in the $200 towards it, but there's another $50 because at the end of the year, they do the total number of prints we have. So at the end of this year, I expect part of that $50 to be spent, but I'm not sure where we're at with it, because even planning hasn't had a lot of stuff, and we split everything in the middle, even though they print out more pages than we do. I think that we're gonna need more than that. So that covers actually the two lines, next two lines coming together.
Thank you.
The building communications, that has to do with the cell phones we have. The town has negotiated with Verizon, and they got a whole different buy-in policy, so that it doesn't cost anywhere near as much for our phones as it used to. So the lines in the past, let me see, we had, let me see. Yeah, it was like $1,300. I want to move it down to $750, and that would cover it. Right now, we're going to be probably around $450, but we haven't gotten new phones for years, and as long as they keep working, we're going to keep going with it. But if something happens, we have to get another phone, that monthly charge goes up, and I had Lynn calculate it, so if something does go wrong, the $750 is going to cover us.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is buildings, conferences, and training. I underspent that by more than 10%, but Amanda, because of doing some of her assessing stuff, and then this past year, we've been busy with some other things, so we haven't reached out to get more certifications and that kind of stuff. So we underspent the line some this year, but I'd like to keep that same line, especially Amanda's very conscientious about trying to do everything exactly the way it's supposed to be through the process, through the state. So she's trying to learn all that stuff, and she's took on a big load, and she's very sharp, and she's catching on quick. So I think we did a good job by having her take over that portion. I did notice, because of that job review thing, that when she started the assessing, she got an extra 12 hours a week. Right now, we're running about 24 hours in assessing, so we actually lost like 12 hours of building time. Now, part of that was a learning curve to learn to get into some of the stuff, which I think the adjustment's been made, and it's been coming along really good. And part of it is, there's some things she has to do upstairs. So when she goes upstairs to do the stuff, she tries to do it more on Mondays and Wednesdays when John's in doing the inspection, so I'm covering the stuff in the office, so I'm covering the phone calls and people coming in. But when we move into the other building, we're assessing in buildings in the same thing. I think a lot of that hourly stuff is kind of going to go down a little bit, because we're going to all be in that, so she can kind of cover both jobs together. So there's kind of a little bit of a push going on right now, but I think it's all going to work through, so it's not going to be an issue, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
The mileage and expenses. I got 250 in that line. I came with 500 last year, and it got knocked down to the 250. And we've been pretty lucky this year where the car hasn't had to be out of service for a while to where we're using our own vehicles. But when Amanda goes to her training and stuff, she has to use her own vehicle. So I'm asking for that line to be beefed up to 400. So that's a slight increase in that line too. The building and postage. I did a whole thing about how we spent each year since I started. My postage amount has gone down considerably each year. And a lot of that comes because I think the town has grasped the idea that the town will take them to court when there's a zoning violation. So people come in, and also the reputation is gone that if they come in and talk to me, I'll help them through their situation or explain to them what they can do and can't do. So we don't have all the zoning violations like we used to have in the past, to where I'm constantly sending letters and chasing people around. So I propose that to be cut in half again, down to $100. And I think it should cover us, and be good. The building equipment. This line has been underspent on a pretty regular basis because it was really designed for replacements of our computers, and they still work. We can still get the stuff done, and we haven't increased and brought them up. But I'm asking for an increase in this line this year because I found out since I did the original budget proposal till now that when we move in the other building, there's a lot of equipment that came with that building that got to be replaced. And I got to move assessing into my office. So not only is the stuff we're building, but I need a desk and 2 chairs and stuff for assessing, and then there's going to be 2 other desks that are going to be needed as part of the building thing because of incorporating the 2 together. So I did a breakdown just to get the 3 desks that I need and 2 chairs is probably going to be like $2,200. So I'm asking for the $2,200 and figuring that we're not going to do upgrades to our computer. And right now, with that Avatar being what it is, we're trying to keep some of our paperwork stuff down, so I'm hoping I don't have to get into another file cabinet for a couple of years. And if the state makes an adoption thing to where they'll agree to what is considered meeting the requirements for retention of records, I'm hoping that we can do away with a lot more paper in the future, but we're kind of waiting on the state for that before we get to that point. There was a line before that I had on my, where I buy my books and stuff for the code, where I thought I was going to be under, and I didn't put it on the new updated list that I had. I ended up spending that money because in the 2015 update, the IBC, which is the commercial building code, they took a lot of the stuff out of the codes and they referenced standards, so I had to buy the standards to get the code. It's all about selling books. I mean, it's what it is. And then in the 2000, right now, it was kind of a political thing going on the last few years about the code being adopted. And basically it come down when the insurance company started saying that new homes aren't built up to a standard, that the rates started going up, that there was a little bit of political pushback to get some of this stuff approved. That in the New Hampshire building,
Okay. National Building.
now the Home Builders Association, which is a pretty powerful lobby, got on board and they worked with some of the counselors out there about establishing things to where codes are consistent through the state and not having individually adopted by towns. There's a written thing that states the code section that a violation is, instead of just writing someone up, because I know this is going to sound hard to believe, but when I go to some of my trainings, the trainings that some guys go to, they got to pay out of their own pocket. The town doesn't pay it. And I even had one guy tell me the town didn't even buy his code books. So I don't know how you can possibly do this job without having the equipment to do the job. It's totally beyond me, and how someone could get put in that position is beyond me too. So anyways, I didn't list that line because I ended up spending the money on that line, and that's the one the budget committee talked about having a revolving fund on. And part of that, the part I was going to is they're planning on adopting the 2018 code in 18 months from after they adopted the 15 code, because now they want to stay one code cycle behind. So I'm looking at next year buying a portion of my 2018 books and then the next portion the year after that, so I can spread it out over the 2 years. And I think that might answer the question that the budget committee had too, but I'll be more than happy to go in detail if it's needed.
Any questions from the board? Peter?
Comprehensively second.
I think the concern that was raised in the budget committee was to have a set amount each year, where in some years it's underspent and then the next year you're buying your codes, and
That's because of the state's pushback, well, because of the political pressure not adopting the codes when they were supposed to be, and now there's going to be a jump from, we had to lag behind from the 2009 to the 15 just getting adopted, and then in a year and a half we're going to adopt the 18. So it's, that lag is what caused
yeah,
that.
but the idea of the revolving fund is that it would be non-lapsing, and then the money.
I would like it if we did that, but I'm not sure how it all works as far as trying to budget and carrying it, because the revolving fund that the other departments have has, it's money that comes in from programs they run. So it would be, I don't know how we'd set this up. And of Connor might know better.
It would have to be an appropriation from town government, I believe.
In my opinion, the administrative burden of creating a revolving fund wouldn't be worth the benefit. That's my opinion.
No, I
on the-
accept that.
On the administrative side, I think if what I heard you say most recently gives me some clarity. Are you able to buy the code books in portions? So where you would spend $800 one year, $800 the next year?
Well, to a point, there was a point to where I overspent, I think it was 2 years ago, or maybe almost 3 now, when I anticipated the 15 to be adopted when it wasn't. And I did talk to John at the time, because I could buy like a library set for quite a bit less money than buying a grouping of books. And so we did it that way, but I had enough money left over for some other lines that my total budget stayed in. So I talked to him at the very end of the year, and I did it at the very end of the year, knowing that my bottom line budget would still balance.
So I think the perspective from the ABC was that this was a regular 2-year cycle where 1 year you would spend next to nothing, the next year you would generally spend twice of what was budgeted because of how the code books needed to come about. So I think with that clarification, and I won't speak for the budget committee, but if the expectation is to spend what's budgeted every year, I think that's consistent with what the ABC was looking for.
In my personal opinion, that's really what our objective was, to
Okay.
have the budget reflect what's actually
Well,
going
I
on.
thought I was going to be under this year until I went to my training and found out I had to buy the standards too.
Great.
So,
Thank
just a general kind of comment, if you're budgeting for furniture, it looks like going into the new building.
That's what I put in, that, for that equipment. Because like I said, normally we use it in the past, we're supposed to have been for computers is what I was told when I first started. And we haven't upgraded them, and we use them to buy file cabinets and stuff like that as we needed them. And this year we didn't spend anything on buying it because we didn't need any file cabinets. And so that, well, I ended up, because I knew I had to get the chairs coming into the thing. And there's a couple of chairs that came up at Staples where they had them less than half price. So I went ahead and got them out of this year's budget, figuring it was gonna save quite a bit of money on next year's budget, and I knew we had to have them. And we've been salvaging wheels off old broken stuff to try to keep them going as long as we have.
So, does that, I know from a budget standpoint, you also had planned for budgeted money accounting for furniture going into a move into a new building.
Yeah, so the direction I gave department heads in the town hall was to do a survey, do an inventory of the equipment that they had, what they knew was ours, what they knew wasn't, and what they knew that they would need in the new building. And to properly budget within each department for the equipment needs. Some are more than others, some are nothing because they have the desks and equipment that they need. The equipment that I have budgeted is for not within departments, so things like equipment for the meeting room and certainly the administrative offices, and to make sure that there's money available to outfit the building once the construction's completed.
So one thing I would like to, and the rest of the board can tell me their feeling on this, one thing I would like to make sure that we're consistent on is that if we're buying furniture for a new building, that we don't have a hodgepodge from one department to the next department to the next department, that we buy all the same furniture from a uniform standpoint. It's all consistent, because then when you need parts and replacement, it's much easier to service everybody's needs from a furniture standpoint, as opposed to having a wide variety of stuff all the way through the organization.
One bid, is that what you're advocating?
I'm not even advocating a bid at this point. I'm saying, rather than having department heads out like shopping at Staples or wherever to figure it out, you look at a uniform furniture plan for the building so it all looks uniform and consistent, and then when you need parts and pieces, you're all going through, preferably the same supplier, which makes things faster and more efficient, easier to manage. It allows you some flexibility if you want to change up workspaces, things of that thought process.
No, I agree. I just think that if we went out one bid on that, that would help too, or at least, put a group together and have them say, this is what we want for furniture and the reasons, then go from there. But that would accomplish what you're looking for.
We'll see what we don't spend out of our 1.9 million to cover some of these costs.
I'm on that building committee too, and from what we're having for a discussion, I'm hoping we come in substantially less is what, you know.
We should.
I would agree. Mr. Ayer?
Another thing to keep an account too, the freight delivery, that freight adds up. So if we don't do individual and stuff, it'd be cheaper than buying in bulk.
And one of the other items I'll add is, I think consistency would certainly be great, and anything that we have to buy new, I think that's a great goal. We'll certainly be bringing over a fair amount of furniture from the space we're using now that we own that doesn't need to be replaced, and I think that's prudent. But I've also put the notice out to department heads, not just in the town hall, but all department heads, to keep a lookout for surplus equipment secondhand. There's office buildings closing all the time, well, not so much in this economy, but all the time, and we have some storage space with the storage locker that we have. And so if we were able to come into secondhand furniture that still has a substantial amount of life, that'd be a good way to save the taxpayers money. Certainly not, furniture that isn't useful anymore, but I know TurboCam has offered furniture to the recreation department and things like that. So I think that'd be a prudent way to save taxpayer money as well.
Any other questions or commentary from the board?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And for the Chips Ahoy.
Got the note though.
All right.
Mark, the 18th, don't forget.
Chief Walker, would you like to come on up so we can finish our conversation on your budget?
So this is section 13 for those following along in the budget binder. And the select board has some additional materials in their packet pursuant to the conversation and some of the outstanding questions from last week. Thanks. This was linked to my report.
Excellent, thanks.
So if my memory serves me correctly, one of the questions you folks wanted a little more clarity on is where the budget breakdown numbers were for the part-time hourly and responder points, EMS on-call and per diem. So I worked on breaking that down so it was a little more clear for you folks on how I put them numbers together. I don't know, do you want me to go through each line? Are you okay with that piece of it? As far as what part-time hourly is as opposed to responder points and EMS on-call and per diem?
So we just have the bullet point version of, basically, I'm reading this, that you shifted money from the area of responder points and placed it in part-time hourly, correct?
Yes, we reduced the responder points to more accurately reflect the cost. Because yes.
Yeah, and then expanded the per diem area so that there would be coverage for the 7 overnights instead of 4.
We're requesting to pick up 24 hours, which would give us 6 nights. And then the other document, the ambulance revolving fund expenditure proposal. I'm going to sneak into that a little bit. One of the things the budget committee had requested is that we spend the money out of the revolving fund so that we weren't building that up to a really huge number. And as I started looking at that and looking at what made sense to me was that this was a perfect opportunity to take 12 more hours out of that revolving line for the purpose of, that would allow me to have one person on 7 nights a week. That's kind of what I'm proposing that you folks look at, and that it doesn't have a budget impact from the perspective that if you agree to do it, it would come out of the revolving fund. if you chose not to give me that 7th night, then the impact it would have on that budget is you still could take that 12 hours out of there and reduce the budget by about $11,000, even though my preference would be is to try to fund the one person on 7 nights a week.
A couple of questions that I had, just because I was trying to make sure I followed this. So with the full-time hourly that you have mapped out on here, are they split, is that, if I remember correctly, 3 days a week and 4 days a week?
Yes.
One is on 3, one is
Yep.
on 4, and then they flip schedules?
Yes.
Okay. And then with the per diem, that's 3 people on call for 24 hours?
Currently on the per diem, there's 4 shifts covered, 24 hours, and then the rest of the pieces of that are, there's 3 days that are taken out of the ambulance revolving funds. That gives us our 7 days of 2 people on. And then the other pieces of that are, there's 46 days built in there to cover vacation time for the 3 full-time employees, and if somebody's gone to a class or something like that, because we're doing man-for-man shifts.
And Andy, you're looking at the schedule, the gray is on-call, those are on-call employees, and the orange and yellow are staffed employees.
And that's,
staffed on-site.
I'm just trying to match up the staffed employees.
Okay.
You're talking about from a 2020 standpoint to see how it all looks and what we end up with for coverage. So it looks like consistently during the day we'll have 3 people on staff, and then 1 person every.
So yes, consistently the daytime coverage wouldn't change. There's 3 people on Monday through Friday, including myself. And then on the weekend, on Saturday and Sunday, there's 2 people on during the day, 1 per diem and 1 full-time employee. And then the other per diem staffing would be the 12-hour shift at night.
And to help distill to the specific ask of the select board for this budget, so there's currently 3 nights which aren't covered. If you look at the current staffing, it's listed as the night going from Tuesday into Wednesday up until Thursday. And so the proposal from the fire chief is to pick up 2 of those nights in the operating budget, which has an estimated impact of $32,000, and then pick up the 3rd night to have full coverage every night out of the ambulance revolving fund. Which would in essence end up with 2 24-hour shifts picked up from the revolving fund and 5 24-hour shifts picked up from the operating budget. So the addition is 2 shifts from the operating budget at $32,000 and 1 shift from the ambulance revolving at half of that.
So I actually was taking a tour up in Farmington, which is a community that's about 80% of the land mass of Barrington and about 75% of our population. And I, of course, had to ask how their staffing model looks. And we are staffed leaner than Farmington is at 80 and 75% of both size and population. So I think it's appropriate that we consider this change, and I have to say that prior to having that discussion, I was not in support of this, and sometimes you just need more of an education. So thank you for the additional material.
Dan?
I received public comment. I'm not gonna give up guy's name, but his wife broke his hip. Chief responded, and is very high praise to the chief and his fellow worker on the services.
So,
No, I'm sorry, good.
So if I'm correct, the total impact that we're looking at, to the budget here is it's about $35,000.
Yep.
And I know.
40 years of doing this, and again, 40 years ago, everybody came out and did it 100% for free. And whether it was Joel Sherman and the people on the ambulance coming to your house, or it was some of the Hayes and us firefighters coming to your house, it was 100% free. And I wish there was some kind of, I wish I could sit here and look at the 5 of you and the 8,500 people that support us and say, I wish that system, I absolutely wish that system still worked. But it doesn't, it's a fragile system. It's not gonna get better, and I think the best thing the town can do is try to get where we need to be incrementally, because I've said this a million times to you guys, I'm not looking for a 1.x million dollar budget, and people cost money, and so I think it's much more prudent for us to work on ways to encourage and keep our people that are volunteers, find ways to continue to foster that. I think the one person on shift at the station at night and backfilling it with volunteers, either I put one firefighter on on call with that, and I put one EMT on call. And a lot of the ambulance stuff we can do with 2 people, and some of the fire stuff we can send 2 people out to do. Again, I think it's I wish I could stand here and tell you that there's a way to do this without.
George?
The only question I have is how much more money do you think that you could take out of the revolving fund to help pay for this?
Well, I think if you look at the paper that I gave you tonight, if you look down at the very bottom piece, it was not my intention to ask you guys to make a decision tonight, because it's not fair for me to walk in with a piece of paper at the last minute. But if you look at my conservative estimates are that we will probably bring in around $70,000 this year in there. There's about 156,000, as of 9/30, there was 154,000 in that revolving account. I'm using the number of $300,000 for an ambulance in about 6 years. If we didn't touch that 154 that's there, we need to put about $20,000 a year into, out of this revolving fund. We just kind of have to earmark that for the replacement of an ambulance. In 7 years, that'd be 140,000. That'd get us to the 300,000. And then the cardiac monitor, today's dollars is 35,000 bucks. I'm going to leave it at that number, because then sometimes that technology, as it gets better, the price comes down a little bit. But obviously, 4 or 5 years down the road, the cost of equipment goes up. So, based on leaving it at the $35,000, that's about $7,000 a year. So if I look at I anticipate spending about $43,000 out of the revolving fund for staffing, should you approve the 7th night, and the ambulance replacement and cardiac monitor pretty much would make that line pretty close to level funded. We'd use up pretty much, or earmark it or use it up. Certainly if I'm wrong, my good friend from the budget committee will certainly let me know that my numbers are off, and that's okay. The thing I would just ask is that if it looks like we're taking in more money than this, I certainly am not opposed. The budget committee has indicated that they'd like to see some more of the costs such as operating, ambulance operating expenses to come out of there. I would beg diligence for this 1 year to, if we approve this, to go looking at my model, see if that works, and by next September, have a pretty good handle on perhaps in next year's budget, if the income goes up, that we could look at removing that money out of there. It's important to understand that warrant article is pretty clear in 2013, is that's how we'll fund the replacement of the ambulance and some of the staffing. So, you know, unless we change that warrant article, I think we have to go down the path of the expectation is that revolving fund is going to pay for the ambulances, because they're the ambulances, that's how it's makes its money. So I'm not a proponent of changing that piece of it, but I don't think I'm doing my job as a fire chief if I don't adequately budget so that in 6 or 7 years, when it's time to replace the ambulance, that the money's not there because we spent too much of it that we don't.
What is the life expectancy of an ambulance? How many years?
8 years.
And if we're budgeting 20K a year, moving forward, we're gonna end up short.
There's money in the account right now.
But there is now, but what's gonna happen is we're gonna go through this first cycle, and 8 years from now, or whenever we go to do it again, we're gonna be short because we went and sold ourselves short by utilizing the money now to offset labor.
Yeah, certainly, but again, I don't disagree with the contention of at least 2 members of the budget committee, is that what they don't want to see is that fund to grow in over proportional size, and please don't let me, I would defer to you folks to voice your opinion. Don't let me speak for you guys on what you'd like to see that.
Go ahead, Peter.
I support the recommendations you're making, but I think you might be a little bit overly optimistic. And I've done the 2018 numbers. I have not yet taken the time to do the 2019s, but that's my intention over the next week. And I'll certainly let you know what my sentiments are. But I think, I mean, I agree with you. I think the number one issue is to make sure we're saving for a new ambulance. You did a heck of a job shopping this year, so we got a tremendous discount on the ambulance that we bought, which helped a lot. It saved a lot of money and left a lot of money in that revolving fund. But I don't think we want to go too crazy and spend that. Now, again, my recollection of the warrant article is that it's supposed to be 50% of the revenues after expenses. And that includes any type of equipment and supplies and labor. So that's the big thing. If we're kicking the labor up by $43,000 a year, I think that's going to have a really negative impact on that fund. Again, I don't mind doing that, but I just don't think we want to go into this thinking, oh, the money's going to be there and we can spend it. Because there's going to be some negative impact, I believe.
Yeah, so I think you're gonna see, I'm only asking to add to take an additional $11,000 out of there over the 43,000. Right now, we're spending about 31, 32 out of there for. So, and again, I've had some conversations, and though I don't want to stand here and tell you this is what the town's going to do, because we never really know what's going to happen a few years down the road. But when you folks graciously allowed us to keep the old ambulance, one of the considerations maybe is that in a few years is to have the body taken off from that ambulance and put it on, remounted on a chassis similar to what we're looking to do with the fire truck. And if we were successful, McGregor just did that with one of their ambulances, and they were very pleased with the outcome. So, you know, certainly in 3 or 4 years, it may make sense to look at something like that and kind of have a little bit newer ambulance, and what is our current new ambulance now. We would have two, you know, we could offset them a little bit, and that would certainly save a little money too. Really, I was trying to find a kind of a balance in the middle to try to meet the recommendations of the budget committee, and
So next week during public comment, you'll have a point to show us where you're saving $35,000 out of other great areas in the town.
well, I just want to bring it to the board's attention that when the land use budget was presented, whoever presented that budget didn't put any snacks on the table, so I don't know if that was noticed or not, but I noticed it from all the audience.
And I thought that must be Connor's responsibility to keep
I wasn't putting any names out there.
I brought 2 packages of Chips Ahoy. I haven't heard back for yet, but
The audience has one, we have one.
How quickly he threw you right under the fire truck.
You gotta let the leadership takes credit for your work.
We don't work as a team.
Oh!
All right, are there any other comments on this?
No.
Thank
Okay, thank
you.
you. All right, moving right along, public comment. Going once, twice, 3 times a lady. Moving on again, staff reports.
Great, so only one agenda item for us tonight, but a few pieces of information I want to share and make sure we give due time. The first piece of information, I'm very excited to announce that Barrington's tax rate has been set by the state at $22.67. So this is a topic we've talked about a number of times over the last few meetings. You'll notice that the tax rate is down from $24.78 to $22.67. That's based on the increased value from the revaluation, which brought values up an average of 12%, close to 12.25% with the added value of new properties. And the breakdown of that tax rate is $16.56 for education, which includes the local education and the state education. We raise a portion of education on behalf of the state, which just stays right here in the community. So for the purposes of this breakdown, it's combined. $3.69 for municipal and $2.42 for the county. I want to specifically draw your attention to the fact that the town's tax rate dropped from 423 to 369, which is the full 12.25% that values increased. So that there's no tax increase based on what was approved in March of this year. That was a lot of hard work, certainly by department heads, but at the direction of the select board. So it's a very positive thing for the town.
You're stealing my thunder. I wanted to comment and say thank you to all the department heads for all the continued hard work, and it accurately and appropriately reflects the work and effort that you all put in to make sure that what we do as a board and as department heads doesn't create additional tax impact to the residents of this town. So thank you again for all your hard work.
Thank you. And so this piece of paper that you have in your packet, it's also available on the town's website, is what we intend to send with every tax bill that the select board approved last meeting. And so I'd like your input if there's anything you'd like to see changed. Staff worked very hard to put this together. Certainly there's a lot of information in there, but the intent is to be as open and transparent as possible and make as much information available to residents as possible in a digestible way. A couple other items of interest that I'll point out. I showed that in this flyer, we show the tax rate history dating back to 2014. One thing of specific interest, between the three destinations of tax revenue, in 2014, 11% went to the county, 20% went to the municipal portion, and 69% went to education. In 2019, 11% still goes to the county, only 16% goes to the municipal side, and 73% to education. And so over that 5-year period, the town's tax rate has stayed very stable, even with the additions or reductions in value. And that's, again, a testament to that hard work. The backside of this piece of paper also includes information about exemptions and credits available to residents and what to do if you disagree with the new assessment, and contact information and hours. So certainly be interested to hear from any board member if you have recommendations for how this should be changed before finalization tomorrow and getting in tax bills sometime next week.
My general comment is I'm happy to see it, and I think what you'll see is as Barrington property value goes up and we continue to be diligent about driving the tax rate as a whole down, it from a rate per thousand assessed value. What you will see is Barrington continues to become more and more desirable because people want to live in towns with a lower tax rate, and that will just make Barrington that much more of a desired place for people to call home. So thank you for all the hard work, Tracy.
The only other thing that I can think of is next to some of the exemptions, we could, in parentheses, note the proposed warrant articles for changes, so that people could be prepared for that. I'm not sure if that would muddy what you've done here, but I do think what you've done here is, should people choose to digest the information, they'll truly understand that the, for lack of a better term, hysteria that took place in the social media world about the increase of the valuations did not play out as an increase in their taxes.
So unfortunately, no information can be included with a tax bill pursuant to any vote. And
Okay,
so
understood.
only factual information.
Okay, I'm going to hope that our residents choose to reach out to us and ask what those might be coming before them.
I actually would have pushed against that one just because I wouldn't want anybody to feel like we were selling something that is
In fact,
not
yeah.
relevant to, or not pursuant to the current state of our economy and environment here. So thank you.
Great, so this will go in tax bills. I don't anticipate any changes, but staff is reviewing it as well, and it'll be finalized tomorrow. And so it will go out in black and white with every tax bill. There's a choice that it could be on colored paper. Does the board have a preference? Same cost?
I think black and white is fine.
No, colored paper.
Oh.
This is gonna be in every property owner's mailbox.
I'm a purist. I'm okay with
All in Barrington. White paper?
Do you think if it's colored, it will be
more.
Stand up.
more red than if it's...
Yellow, green, and blue. I think both. Yeah, I don't know. Yellow, green, and blue. So it may show up on a colored piece of paper if the board doesn't have a preference.
My guess is if you put it on yellow, more people will notice it in with their white tax bill, so.
Great. So the next item, if there's nothing further on the tax rate or that information sheet that will go in tax bills, the town has a completed financial audit for the 2018 financials. In the board packet, I included a copy of all documents, the financial statements, which is the big document, the governance letter, management letter, and internal control letter. It was completed on October 17th. Positive remarks from the auditors, a decreasing amount of adjustments and feedback since Vashon Kluge has worked with the town. This is their 4th year. A big piece of significance was compliance with that GASB statement 75, which the board supported, cost an additional almost $4,000, but we received good feedback from the auditor for that, and again, a decreased number of adjustments. Staff, certainly the finance office staff, but department heads across town worked very hard to get the auditors the information that they needed, so certainly special thanks to them, and I'm glad to have positive remarks.
From a managerial note perspective, the only thing I could find was that there were recommendations that the town establish segregated funds in the general ledger, and other than that, there were no other managerial notes, correct?
Correct.
Excellent, thank you.
I didn't have anything that I thought was earth-shattering out of it, so I was happy to see it with no major issues, just some recommendations and stuff that we can talk about from
Absolutely. As we've talked about, the finance office is doing a lot of proactive work with things like cash receipting and cash handling. Certainly in conversations with the auditors that they're aware of, but things like that will continue to keep the town's financials in a condition that the auditors are satisfied with. So there's nothing further with the audit. I'll move on. I wanted to make sure the board was aware. NHMA, the New Hampshire Municipal Association, which serves all of the towns and cities in the state of New Hampshire in an advocacy capacity, provides a lot of the trainings and conferences available to municipal staff. I was nominated to the board of directors. The vote will take place on November 14th. If selected, there'll be monthly meetings and participation in that capacity, so I want to make sure the board was aware.
Question in reference to that, Connor, do you plan on doing that during the time that you're typically employed here in the town of Barrington?
Yeah, so certainly the meetings that would happen during the day would be during working hours, but the amount of time that I work, I certainly wouldn't have any problem meeting the 40 hours that I've committed to the town of Barrington.
And is your mileage to be paid for through the town, or is it reimbursed through NHMA?
It's a good question. If it's not reimbursed through the association, it would be paid personally.
Okay. So, first of all, congratulations for being nominated. Second of all, it does not, becomes very clear to me that they were very wise in electing you, and chances are they will realize what value you can add to that role, so good luck with the vote.
Thank you.
Again, congratulations. One thing, just as a cautionary note on it, is please be cognizant of your wife and your child. You have a young baby, and it's important to make sure you're there with them.
Thank you. It's a very large board, so I look forward to contributing in whatever capacity that I can and not overextending myself, so I appreciate your support. The next item is Richardson Pond Dam update. This is something that the board has talked about at the last couple of meetings. I wanted to make sure that the board was aware of
Years of discussion.
recent years, meetings over recent years. So I included a copy in your packet just to make sure that all board members did have a copy of the letter of deficiency which was sent to the town in May of 2016. So the first slate of the requirements of that letter of deficiency had been met previously. There was a deadline of December 1st, 2019, which stipulates that the town must engage the services of a qualified engineer to complete a detailed inspection and reconstruction design. And that piece there has been little progress on since the initial slate of progress. And so in working with the Town Lands Committee and in part with the Conservation Commission, I contacted DES, the author of the letter of deficiency, to make sure that if we didn't meet that deadline, we wouldn't be penalized. And I intend to send a letter asking for relief of that deadline because it is in progress. A quick overview of my understanding of what needs to be done and in what order. The town will need to hire an engineer to perform a full dam inspection and assessment, including a hydrology and hydraulic study, which will set a benchmark for a 50-year storm. So that's required by the letter of deficiency. Moving forward from that, the letter of deficiency indicates that a design needs to be drawn up for the dam. Some dirt and shovel work will have to be done. It isn't satisfactory in its current state, but there will be some options moving forward. We could either reconstruct the dam, basically reduce it 2 feet so it's no longer in NHDES jurisdiction. We don't have to worry about their inspections moving forward. At this point, that would be my preference, or reconstruct it to their satisfaction. Regardless, that would require a survey of the property, a dam design by an engineer that meets the either meets the design requirements or is reduced outside of jurisdiction. And then the last phase would be the dam construction or reconstruction based on the design. And so it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but the wheels are in motion. I will be attending the Conservation Commission meeting on Thursday to discuss this. I think one of the items that will be of immediate importance is the funding source. Every step of this process will cost money, and it's possible that where that money comes from will need to be reconciled between the Select Board and the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Fund has a few $100,000 in it, but it isn't clear to me yet whether the Conservation Commission intends to use that fund to meet the requirements of this letter of deficiency. And so I intend to leave that November 7th meeting with a better understanding and facilitate any conversation that would be necessary between the Conservation Commission and Select Board. I'd be happy if there's a consensus of the Select Board. I'd be happy to take the Select Board's position to that meeting as a starting point.
So I think my conversation and my position is, for years we have been talking about this, and we have been very clear that it is the responsibility of the Conservation Commission to fund these items. That is part of their role and responsibility, which is why they get 75% of all property coming out of current use to make sure that they can afford to take care of these items. So when you started by saying the town engages in it, I really think the Conservation Commission needs to be the organization engaged in it, because they're the organization responsible for managing it, maintaining it, and funding it, which was part of this whole agreement of them taking this property way back in the day.
So at this time, I intend to manage this project with the support of the Town Lands Committee and the Conservation Commission. If it's a consensus of the board that the board's understanding is that the Conservation Fund would fund the requirements of this letter of deficiency, I can certainly let them know.
Mr. Ayer?
I just want to bring to your attention, the Town Lands Committee has been working on this, and Connor is the appointment with the state. We made a lot of activity already. And then Friday, thank the road agent, Brian Lindsay, and a citizen, they went and cleaned out the brush of observations and pictures I took and gave to Connor, and they cleaned it all up, and we're moving forward real fast in a short time period, and we make a lot of accomplishments.
So my general comment is I appreciate everybody doing all that. I don't want us to fall back in the same situation we were in before, where everything just gets pushed off to our highway department to be responsible for taking care of it, when the whole point is that the Conservation Commission took this land and is supposed to be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of this land, not defer it to our town departments to then be responsible for.
What time is that meeting, Mr. Chairman? 6:30?
Yes.
It's either 6 or 6:30, I can confirm.
But they have the,
It's at the elementary school.
very, they have a time frame. There's a couple people gonna be there. I just got an email today. I think I called up.
I can follow up with an email and confirm with you the start time. It's either 6 or 6:30.
6:30.
Is the board in consensus that that is our position, that this should be, that the Conservation Commission is responsible for making sure the funding of this is covered through?
We've discussed this for years, and we've always come to the same conclusion.
Yep, I'm just looking to
It
make
just
sure
gets,
that
it
we
gets
have
kicked down the
consensus.
road further and further.
Well, and this was my concern.
Do we know
Years
what the
ago.
cost will be to redo the dam and make it 2 feet shorter?
I've started conversation with 3 different qualified engineers, and the first question is a cost estimate for each stage of this process. Unfortunately, I haven't heard back from any of them. I hope that I might prior to this meeting. I know that I will prior to the meeting on the 7th.
Does anybody object if I attend that with Connor?
I'll be
Nope.
there.
No, He'll be there, yeah. So it won't be a legal meeting anyway, there's only 2 of us.
Well, it's posted anyway, it's public meeting.
So,
Yeah.
based on the information that's returned to us, will give us a better idea of whether it's something that the Conservation Commission,
They should,
Well,
well,
yeah.
going forward, it becomes important that each select board in the future pay very close attention to what they're adopting.
And where the funds are coming from. I don't know if our fire chief was itching in his seat, so I don't know if there was something he would like to add and comment to this.
That dam is very near and dear to me because from an emergency management standpoint, I encourage the town fathers not to accept that piece of property just because of the viability of that dam back in somewhere around 2001 or 2002 or 2003, and George may have been on the board, and when they had that meeting that night, they stacked that room full of engineers and people that basically stood there and looked at the Board of Selectmen and said that this would be a low-impact dam and that the fire chief had nothing to worry about, and that they could, that the town should take this jewel of a property. So, you know, from a public standpoint, my concern was, you know, down the road, what happened, these dams become expensive, and the Swains Lake Dam is a perfect example of it. Is, and I'm not advocating Swains is certainly a recreational lake and stuff like this, and a nice thing to have, but it's expensive for the town to maintain dams and have them inspected and engineering and all this other stuff, and that was a concern I had, that someday the Richardson Pond Dam was gonna get old. Here we are 20 years later and it's old and the town's gonna spend money on it. So I 100% support that the Conservation Commission wanted that piece of property, and I would encourage that they use funds out of that to maintain that dam. Thank you.
I appreciate the insight from 2001.
It was a full house and they really, but the,
Mr. McIver, anything else that you
thank you.
have to?
On Richardson Pond Dam, no, I do have a couple more items. And so I'll continue to keep the board updated on that Richardson Pond Dam item. I wanted to make the board aware, I had sent, as directed by the board, I had sent a draft copy of the memorandum of understanding between the town and the school for the benefit of those in the audience and listening at home. The town and the school has a storied history of sharing services and equipment that's in the best interest of taxpayers. Recently, what facilitated the review of the memorandum of understanding was the resignation of the facility manager, who shared his role with the town and the school, and the town paid a stipend for that. I use this opportunity to define closer the arrangement between the town and the school. Most of what's in the memorandum of understanding, which is also linked to my report and available online, is current practice. The items that changed and I highlighted in my report are the facility manager the town no longer pays a stipend. The school board chair indicated in his public comment at the last meeting that it was his intention, or the school board's intention, that the employee not be a contracted employee or a shared employee. And so I simply, in the MOU, identified the responsibilities on the town side for that position and removed the payment from the town to the school. The other item that I changed in this MOU, in the result of a meeting between the superintendent, myself, the road agent, and a couple of others, was putting the road agent responsible for winter maintenance operations for the town and the school, specific to driveways, roads, and parking areas. Currently, the town plows about 1.5 of the school parking lots, but having 2 people controlling winter maintenance operations has proved to be inefficient. I think there's a lot of efficiencies to be gained by having the road agent be responsible and able to direct school staff during winter maintenance operations and utilize both town and school equipment to the benefit of taxpayers in the best way possible. So those were the 2 differences from standard practice. The rest of the MOU simply defines the current practice and goals of the MOU. So this was delivered to the superintendent. I heard back from him late today, and he indicated that he did not feel that this was consistent with the school board chair's comments of it not being a contracted or employee relationship. And so my anticipation was that this would go to the entire school board on Tuesday for their meeting tomorrow. Unclear if it will. I didn't know if the select board had any comments or adjustments that they'd like to see to the MOU.
Mr. Hare?
I agree with clarifying about, one person being in charge. We have, the town, we have enough equipment, but we have good bodies in it and stuff, utilize time and stuff, plus rotation of hours and stuff. So I think during winter maintenance stuff, one person could rotate all that and get a game plan. I have concerns about a pusher. To get a big pusher in a parking lot on the loaders, driving around the town roads during a storm and with traffic. Or we could do homework and buy a small one with the wings that fold out. Everyone's going to them now. Or you buy a couple of used ones and leave them at the parking lots and just go there and hook up to them. There's a lot of used up on the market. And it'd be safer than driving around town with them. That's my personal concerns.
Okay. Any other comments, George?
Yes, I have a comment. On page 4, item C, line item D underneath it says, recreation, including buildings, playgrounds, and fields. And my comment is that for the sport field use, nothing's been stated about the maintenance, and is this going to be a concern of ours? That's my only part that I found when I read it up. I wasn't, so that's what I have in that part there, so that was my question.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean, so this
Well,
section
what
is
I'm
on
saying-
landscaping.
What I'm saying is, because of the recreation department having playground and some of the fields, and they might have to have the fields lined or cut specially or anything else like that, that's the reason why I brought it up.
No, so that's a
Soccer
great
fields
point.
have to be a certain height and everything else,
So
all
this,
the travel.
Article 5, which is landscaping, identifies the services which the school provides to the town. Separate from the facility manager, this specifically indicates that the school staff landscapes the town facilities. So they currently mow and landscape around the recreation building, around the playground and the fields. That is a practice that they already do, absent of the facility manager, just as a shared service, similar to how the the town helps plow some of their parking lots.
Well, that's the reason I brought it up is if the recreation director decided that she wanted to have a soccer game and wanted the fields lined and what have you, how does that fit into the situation? That's the only reason I brought it up like I did that way.
Yep.
I'm good with it. I'm hoping that they will bring this before their board tomorrow. Dawn, are you going to be at the school board meeting tomorrow night? There's no meeting.
They canceled it because Dave, Garrett, and Tim can't make it. I just heard that tonight.
So, okay, so, I would just, if you need me to get in touch with Dave to help push this along.
Yeah, so my understanding, certainly from the school board chair's comments, was it was his and the school board's intention for myself and the superintendent to iron out what we thought was most appropriate.
Yep.
It seems like it will still require input from the school board. Is it my understanding that the select board, this document captures the select board's intentions for an MOU?
Yes. Anybody disagree?
No, I brought my concerns, but this covers it, I think.
Right. How they do it is different than do we agree that this is what is encompassed in that.
Right.
And similarly, I have full support from staff for this document as well. I shared the document with affected staff and other staff, and I have full support. So hopefully we can reach an agreement with the school to continue the very beneficial arrangement for taxpayers. So, last couple of items I wanted to note as the first meeting in November, the November work anniversaries. So John Janelle from the fire department has been with the town for 21 years. Aaron Paradise with the highway and transfer station support assistant has been with the town for 11 years. So that started in the recreation department with the preschool that they ran, and after a few years in April of 2013. started in the highway department in the town. Richard Smith, a firefighter in town for 7 years. David Ballion, the welfare caseworker for 7 years. And Robert Williams, our retiring police chief, has been with the town for 4 years this month. So in honor of Veterans Day, which is next week, we do not have a meeting. I asked department heads for veterans that worked in their department, so just wanted to recognize Eric Baker, Tyler Courier, Scott Young, Sam Sorosky, Michael Bayer, Sean Guile, Donald Millette, Jake Roger, Tyler Slankard, Richard Smith, and Chris Waring for their service to this country.
Very good.
And Municipal Office Administrator Cottle has a few items that you'll be signing. So.
For your signature, I have the AP summary check register 2019-88 for period ending, 10/30/19, payroll manifest for period ending 10/27/19, 4 land use change tax warrants, and 1 corrected deed with no covenants. There was an error, and I have corrected it.
All right. So I don't see it on here, but I know we received the minutes for the last meeting.
No. I do want to give, and this is a bad time to do it because the one time that it didn't happen, but I do want to give very special recognition to Tiffany. It's a very tight turnaround to have minutes from a Monday meeting ready for a Wednesday packet to the select board. And in the budget season where we have meetings every week, she hit that, met that responsibility every single week. Again, a terrible time to bring it up because the one that she hasn't. Her and I have talked about the fact that the expectation is certainly that they're not ready to go for that next meeting, but she has exceeded expectation and has done so. So you'll have last week's meeting at the November 18th meeting. Last week's meeting minutes at the November 18th meeting.
And then one of the other pieces you had noted in your report was the forestry grant acceptance.
So that's a new business item.
All righty. Oh, right there in front of my face. Old business?
Do we need a motion to accept the forestry?
Under new business when it comes up.
No, that's it. Nobody's got old business.
No old business, new business, acceptance of the forestry grant.
Motion to accept the forestry.
Seconded.
Here, aye.
Haley, aye.
Aye. Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for
You're
writing
welcome.
the grant.
Thank you. Yes. Select persons report. Select person Ayer.
Oh, boy. I didn't have a meeting, but this Thursday, I'm having a grand time for that conservation. I'm with Connor 2 nights this week. I'm looking forward to it.
You're living on the edge, select person.
Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. I have nothing to report as far as where the library goes, but I do have a concern. My concern is on Church Street. It's a foundation certification, which I have here for a copy for everyone, so everybody can see it. The foundation shows a new existing foundation, and it shows the stamp was given to it by the surveyor, and it's at 44 feet on one side, 35-36 on the other. My concern is that when I look at it, I personally look at it, I see that it does not look to be within the 40-foot setback or the 30-foot side setback. And what I'm here before the board is to ask you if you would grant permission to have John go out and just verify the fact that it does fit within it. I realize we have a stamp on this, as clearly indicated that you can see that. But when you look at it, and this is the third one in 20 years that I have asked for help with, and I'm just asking if the board would be willing to authorize John to represent the board and go out and verify the measurements. The reason why I'm asking the board to do that is that it's something that John is not going to take on his own, because John will be legally susceptible if he does it on his own, but if he goes by the board, then the board will turn around and take that away from him and allows him to go off and do it. So that is the only reason why I have this here for you to do, and I just ask that you grant John, and if not, well, that's what the board is for.
Connor and then Dan.
So, just to be clear, the vote that the board would be taking would be to direct the zoning administrator, John Huckins, to go take individual measurements of the approximate setback. So the zoning administrator isn't a surveyor, isn't a licensed surveyor or an engineer, and so this would be an attempt at a spot check of a foundation certification that we have. The zoning administrator, building inspector is comfortable with the foundation certification that we have, but it's certainly the select board is within their right to direct the zoning administrator to go out and take measurements, or to direct the town to hire an engineer to go take measurements and verify the foundation certification that we have. So the vote from the board would be either to direct the zoning administrator or to hire an engineer to do so.
Mr. Ayer?
What's the written complaint on this?
I did not file a written complaint, I did a verbal complaint. I went through and talked with Connor, and I also talked with John on it.
Well,
So our process is you have to file a written complaint.
I need to finish up, please.
To request that the board take action. That is our official process.
All right? I will ensure that happens.
Every agency has a board of ethics, and it's not your job to go up there, and I won't hold the board. I think you're misusing your powers as a selectman. I think you have ethical violations now and as when you were a chair. If you want to proceed with this, I will. You have stepped out of bounds. You don't have a written complaint, and you do more as a selectman. You don't want micromanaging. The state controls this. You're questioning the professional's licensed engineer. You have no authority to do that. I think you're violating ethical rules. I think you should be looked at.
I'll be honest, and I'll be candid. I know the individual doing it, and I also know exactly like how he did it, because I was told about the process. And I do agree that this has a licensed surveyor stamp on it and mark, so I don't think a surveyor is willing to put their stamp and mark on something that doesn't meet the requirements. I personally, I know you took it to John, and I know he's reviewed it, and barring that, my personal opinion is, I don't support us getting in the business of going out and micromanaging the work that folks are doing, especially when you have licensed people who have stamped it. So
I understand that, and it was my concern by looking at it, and that's the reason why I brought it forward, and I can understand right now the chair's position on it, so will have to go along with it.
how does the board feel about this?
Have we ever questioned a licensed land surveyor prior to this?
The question was if the town had previously questioned the licensed land surveyor. I'm not aware.
And I don't think I want to start making that a trend either. Ms. Hatch?
I agree, I don't think, I'm not a licensed land surveyor, and I'm not gonna second guess his work.
So I think the unanimous consensus is this is not something we're interested in pursuing, and we don't perceive it as being an issue considering it's stamped by a licensed land surveyor.
I understand that perfectly well, and I accept that from the board, but I had a concern with it, and I thought I'd bring it before the board, and I appreciate the board taking the time to consider it. Thank you.
Yep.
And to be clear, it was my advice to Select Person Bailey that if he was interested in seeing something happen different than how staff was handling it, that I felt the proper avenue was to put it by a vote of the board, whether or not to direct any further action. So if there is a requirement in the board's policy that there be a written request like that in the future, I'll certainly advise as such. But it wasn't my request that Select Person Bailey bring that to the whole board.
All right. Mr. Ayer?
Was legal counsel informed on this?
A request was made to legal counsel of if the town had reservations about a certification from a licensed land surveyor, what the options would be.
So just my kind of gripe on this is Mr. Bailey is no longer the chairman of the board, so requests for legal counsel would either be made because we think it needs to be there, or somebody has come to me and asked for legal representation. So I feel like we're getting a little beyond somebody's boundaries here.
Yeah, so.
If you want to talk about, excuse me, if you want to talk about getting in the boundaries, if you remember correctly, we as the board said that if we had a situation.
You would bring it to the chairman
The
of the
chairman
board.
and/or the town administrator. That's exactly how we had it, one of the two. And I brought it to the town administrator. And I'm not here to argue anymore. I have said all I'm going to say, and I'm not going to embarrass myself or anybody else any further. I have comments that I could make that were made about me, but I'm going to end it right now. I have nothing else to say. And I appreciate the comments that the chair has made.
Ms. Hardikoff and then Mr. Ayer.
So it appears to me that the board has a consensus of how to proceed with that. It also appears to me that the request for legal counsel review was valid. I think that two things occur to me. When people choose to bring forward in their capacity as an elected official information because they feel it's the right thing to do, they should not be chastised publicly for it. That said, I do think as a collective group, the select board has made a decision. This is, in my opinion, then a settled issue, and we should move forward.
Mr. Ayer.
My only concern, what legal counsel was on, I've requested for the free one, New Hampshire Municipality there, information before, clarification. Do we pay for this? How do which lawyers handled it?
Yeah, so the town's council that the town pays for answered the question, and to be clear about the request for legal counsel. So the question in my opinion is a valid one in a general sense, that if the town disagrees with something, what are the town's options?
Sure.
And that's something that I didn't know, that's something the building inspector didn't know. Now, this was a situation where myself as town administrator and the building inspector didn't have a concern. But if at some point in the future there was a concern, what are the options that we can take? And so asking that question, I deemed in my capacity as town administrator a valid one to know the answer to. We've looked into a situation enough to have a bookend of if we actually did have concern, this is what we would do. And so the advice from the town's council was either send the zoning administrator out there or hire an engineer. I imagine it took her all of 15 minutes and we'll pay appropriately. But that was something that I found appropriate to take to the town's council, not knowing the answer myself, and the building inspector not knowing the answer.
Good learning moment. Okay.
And my last comment on it is when we say the town, there are 5 members that were elected by the folks of this town to make that decision, not one member of this board. So I would like to make sure that we keep that in mind and we're conscientious about that as we move forward.
Duly noted.
Duly noted, and I hope that the same rules will apply to others in the future,
Duly
as
noted.
being applied to
I
myself.
believe they always have.
No, they have not. I'm not here to argue that point, as I said. Thank you.
Okay.
Select Person Hatch.
We have 2 hearings scheduled for the 20th of November. Both are variances. One is on 507 McDonald Shore Drive, and the other one is on 1685 Franklin Pierce Highway. And there again, that is a variance too, so they will be held on the 20th.
All right, Select Person Hardikoff.
Have not had the pleasure of attending a rec commission meeting, and will not have the pleasure of attending the the school board meeting I was expecting to attend. That's nothing to report.
Conservation Commission meeting is tomorrow. So
Thursday.
Planning Board meeting is tomorrow. So that is all that I have. Nothing new that we haven't already discussed in our prior meetings. Great. All right, last public comment.
Casey O'Brien, Wolf, 24 All Road. Also the general contractor for the Church Street project. I have heard Mr. Bailey has made complaints. I did formally file a written complaint to the town administrator because of this. Me having all the proper paperwork to move forward with the project, and then there still being a problem. So I just want to make sure that this is no problem anymore, right?
It has appeared that the board has made the decision, there is no problem going forward,
Okay.
and there is no further action that will be taken.
Because I have a building going up that'll be up in the next 3 days, so I just want to make sure that, you know, there isn't going to
It
be
appears this is
more
a
issues.
settled issue.
All right, that was the first thing. Thank you, George. Second thing, talking about the MOU and you and Dan and Mark and whoever sitting down and talking, I have a concern about Mark trying to take over a lot of the school stuff, you know, the school plowing and the maintenance. He's got his hands full as it is with the mileage of road that we have and the parking lots that we already do. We have always in the past taken care of the ECLC, plowing, and opened up the elementary school. The middle school is a whole another ball game. I mean, it's a big, long parking lot. And so, I mean, that's gonna put a lot of extra wear and tear on a lot of other people to try to get that done too at the same point. And him not knowing what the school's budget is for overtime on the guys, that's the next thing, you know, that how is he to make that phone call to those guys not knowing if the school wants to pay overtime or, you know, wants to call their guys in even on a day off early to help remove snow. So I just want to, you know, make sure that everybody's on the same page there when it comes to funding also, not just for the town, but school side. If Mark's going to make that call, you know, we're not going to get chastised at the end of it because their guys worked overtime, you know, not knowing. So, thank you.
And I'll just add, all those points were considered in the development of the MOU and thoroughly discussed. They're good points.
Any last public comment? Hearing none, make a motion to close the meeting.
Second.
Everybody got to sign the...
Yes, but we can close the
Yep.
meeting and still sign. Second.
Roll call vote.
Air aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Snap aye. There is no
Thank you all.
non-public, so that's the conclusion of the meeting.